Okay. Can you guys hear me? Am I coming through? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if you can see me, if you can hear me. Ready to get started? Okay. Thank you, Jocelyn. All right. Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for the fourth installment of the Layer 10 Live LinkedIn Live Masterclass. Today, I'd like to open up with a little bit of an icebreaker, other than just tell me where you're from, which I'm happy to hear where you're from. If you want to put that in the chat, by all means. But the icebreaker that I want to use, I'm calling the guilty pleasure movie. So here is the scenario. It's a rainy weekend afternoon. This would happen not during football season, obviously, because then you would be busy. But it's not football season. You're lazing around on a rainy weekend afternoon. You're just flipping through the channels. And what is the one movie, no matter how many times you've seen it before, that if you find it on cable, you will stop and watch every time it's on? Put your answer in the chat. What is that movie that gets you every time, that will stop? I have some ideas of some movie titles I expect to see, but please put in the chat, what is that guilty movie for you? Guilty pleasure movie. And I have my answer too, of course. Ed, good to see you. Thanks for joining. All right, well, my answer, Breakfast Club. Very good. That's a good one. I didn't anticipate that one. Lots of John Hughes movies actually can make this list. All right, for me, what I expected to see was Shawshank Redemption. That's one that certainly I'll stop on that one. But the one for me that might be a little less easy to predict is Urban Cowboy. Is that one that John Travolta, Deborah Winger, Scott Glenn, I will stop and watch that one every single time it's on. So, yeah, thank you for participating. Let's go ahead and jump in. Whether you are here for the first, second, or nth time, you know this to be true. The way we've been designing and deploying technology in our projects is broken. It's massively broken. But the good news is the situation isn't irreparable. We can fix it. And if you're here, you're likely either a developer, architect, contractor, operator, or facility manager, and chances are you're seeing the same thing we are. Technology is changing the way buildings are designed, built, and managed. But here's the truth. Most commercial real estate professionals are still trying to figure it out as they go. And that's why we created Layer 10 and the Layer 10 Academy. So you don't just keep up, you lead. By the end of this masterclass, I will have equipped you with new ideas and insights into this overlooked component of CRE development. Welcome to Designing Smarter Buildings, a technology strategy for CRE professionals. Now, in the name of transparency, I do want to let you know that at the end of our presentation today, you will be invited to stay on and hear an offer to join the Academy and dive even deeper into this topic. And with that said, I guarantee that even if you don't choose to join the Academy, you will leave here with actions you can apply to your projects immediately. What if you didn't have to walk into the first design meeting guessing, but instead walked in with a clear plan to figure out what the technology needs to do and when those decisions need to happen? What if your architects, IT, and contractors were all aligned before the first RFP ever went out? What if your next project launched with a clear vendor-neutral plan, so every system worked together and no one got blindsided? We get it. IT is scary and misunderstood. It gets ignored, shrugged aside, forgotten about, like the proverbial can that gets kicked down the road and not picked up until it's too late. I can illustrate this in a story about a meeting we had with one of our early prospects who did become a client and is still an active client. When we sat down with him, I asked, why did you agree to take this meeting? And then I let him speak. He went on for at least 15, maybe even 20 minutes, talking about his great disdain for IT, how it's too expensive, it's too complicated, it's always late, and even when it does get completed, it's not done on time. And when it is done, nobody knows how to work it. So when he finished what he was saying, I said, well, that's exactly why Layer 10 is in business, to solve those very problems. We agree that technology is complicated, challenging, and expensive, especially when you end up investing in the wrong things. And you can't afford to get it wrong. It's a critical component of the success of your project, and it's too often overlooked until it's too late. And here's the secret. The less attention it receives, the more it costs. The longer you put it off, the greater the chaos down the road. We cannot afford to keep ignoring the role of technology in our spaces any longer. Smart buildings sound great until you're in the middle of a build with no plan for the technology. And even if you're not building quote unquote smart, if you're not looking for the latest and greatest, there is a certain level of technology expected in whatever space you're building. That's where the name Layer 10 comes from, that layer of technology that gets ignored. We're bringing attention to that. Too often, in too many builds, technology is considered too late, engaging vendors that push conflicting agendas, and no one owns the process. No one is ultimately accountable. And where does that get you? Frustration, budget overruns, broken user experiences, and we decided to fix that. Well, by the way, as we move through this, if you have any questions during this, please put them in the Q&A, and at the end, I've saved some time to hopefully answer as many of those as I possibly can. Now, a bit about me and a bit about my AI twin here. You'll never see me posing in front of a scooter like this, so you know it's not me. You may have seen me before. You may have seen me on stage at a BizNow conference. You may have heard me on podcasts or read some of my things on CNN.com, Colorado Real Estate Journal, or you subscribe to my weekly LinkedIn newsletter. But for those of you who are meeting me for the first time, my name is Ken Wilkinson. I'm the founder and CEO of Layer 10. We're the creators of the Layer 10 Framework and the Layer 10 Academy. Also, along with my wife, Zara, we are the co-board presidents of Trailhead Community, a nonprofit building housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. If I have time, I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. I'm also in the process of finishing my first book, Bricks to Brilliance, Designing Buildings That Think. But the most important thing to know about me is that I'm passionate about fixing the disconnect between how buildings are built and how people actually use them. And I want to start with a story of how Layer 10 got started. The truth is, I didn't set out to do this kind of work. I was in my 40s before this idea really came to me, right around 40. I was working at my old firm, Point B. I was assigned to a project with DaVita, the kidney care company. They needed someone to lead the IT components of their new headquarters build. But here's the thing. I had never worked on a building project before, and I had little experience with IT infrastructure. I was a software guy. My first job was as a COBOL programmer. I knew a little bit about networking and infrastructure, but not nearly enough to be considered an expert. But still, I accepted the project because in consulting, you learn to jump in, figure things out, get comfortable with discomfort, even when it's a little new and a little scary. But what I quickly found out on that job is that I loved the work, helping build something real, something tangible, something you can walk through, touch, see, and feel. It actually reminded me of when I started college as an architecture student. After one class at the University of Florida, go Gators, I abandoned the idea of becoming an architect. It was not even a full class. It was maybe a month into Design 1 before I realized I was not cut out for this. And it's a great program. You know, University of Florida, from architecture to basketball, we do all things very well. But I exited architecture and I switched over to IT. So here I am now, back to my story. It's 20 years later, and I'm actually working at the intersection of both of those areas, IT and architecture. Now, after that project with Point B, I took a new job running a team at a big company, and it was fine. I was brought in to fix a problem, to build an organization. But after everything got up and running, there was nothing left there for me to do, nothing left for me to build. And I got bored. I tried finding new challenges around, but this is really when I had my first big aha moment. I love to build things. I'm not meant to just keep things running. I need to create. And I tried finding new challenges in that job, but my boss kept telling me, Ken, stop consulting to me. Everything is running well. You've done a great job. Just keep running it. But eventually I stopped fighting who I really am. I'm a builder, a teacher, I'm a guide. I need to be helping others grow and solve real problems. While I was still there, being bored, I started a couple of side hustles, and none of them worked out, but I learned a lot. And some of those lessons were more expensive than others. And something I learned from Pete Roberts on his podcast, Hands in Daylight, I call those my tuition payments. I paid a price for that lesson, but it set me up for what we've created with Layer 10. So soon after that, the company announced layoffs, and I raised my hand. I volunteered to go. I was definitely ready for a change. And although I was looking forward to it, I still had some nerves. I'd never been out of work before, and I'd never been laid off. And guess what happened? DaVita, that same client that gave me this taste for what we have started with Layer 10, they were building another building across the street, and they wanted to bring me back. So not long after that, I was back there doing the work that I love, integrating technology in commercial real estate projects. And I started thinking, is there a business here? A firm focused on solving the problem of the lack of focus on the technology components of pre-construction. So my co-founder and I started socializing the idea with anyone we could find in our network, developers, architects, electricians, builders. And they all said the same thing. They were all enthusiastically in favor of this idea. And almost to a point that it made us nervous, that how can we be the first ones to think of this? But it was enough to give us the confidence to launch Layer 10. And doing that, starting your own company, for those of you who have ever done it, it's like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane and sewing the parachute on the way down. We started a consulting company that's focused on helping people plan the right technology for their spaces. Then one day, not long after we launched, I was in a sales meeting, and I asked the prospect why he wanted his project to be smart. And he hired me on the spot. I'll go more into that story in the next slide, but that was my second big aha. The product isn't the most important thing, the purpose is. What are we trying to do? Who are we building for? That's where the magic happens. Before the first foot of cable is installed, a beautiful space at go live begins with asking the right questions at the design table. That moment confirmed what Layer 10 is all about. Ask the right questions, put people first, choose gear that fits the goal, and don't change your goals to fit the gear. Since then, we've stayed true to that mission, and it works. Until the recent economic downturn, we had a 100% client retention rate. Every client we'd ever worked with continued to use us on every project that they built. Even DaVita, that very first client, is still an active client to this day. And that's how the story of Layer 10 begins. But let's dig deeper into the guiding principles that came out of that journey. So I mentioned that sales story. Let me give a little more detail about that. So it was actually our first inbound sale, first time we got a cold call in asking for a meeting. It was a result of the first article that we had written about what we were doing. And it was a very short note. It was, my name is Sean. Here's my project. Here's the website. Call me. We need to talk. So of course I did. And he was traveling, and we set up a time to meet just a couple of weeks later. And we met actually in the lobby of DaVita, because they were one of only 2 or 3 clients that we had at the time. But we had just finished a space, and it gave me an opportunity to demonstrate what we did and pointed out a few things. And then we walked across the street for lunch and got engaged in small talk. And eventually, when it was time to turn to business, I asked a single question. I said, Sean, why do you want Miller's Landing to be a smart city? And he paused, and he said, You know what, Ken? I've been talking to, and he named off 2 or 3 large product manufacturers in the smart city space, integrators, names you would recognize with products that we use today. None of them are asking me that question, he said. All they do is they come into the room with the gear that they've built and told me this is what I need to be successful, but they don't even know what I'm trying to do. You're the first person to ask me that question, and that's why I need you on the team. And that's when we realized that these guiding principles were the key differentiators in our industry. This is what's going to make the difference to improve how technology is integrated into physical space by focusing on design, centered on the human experience, and maintaining product neutrality until that design is completed. And here's the secret. These human-centered design principles are not new to the CRE sector. Can you imagine architecting plans for a hotel, for example, without knowing anything about the goals of the owner, the target guest that the guests that you are targeting, not to mention market competition? We don't do that with architecture, interior design, or landscaping, yet it's common practice to leave IT on the outside looking in. And maybe that's because technology isn't considered a creative field, but that's a mistake, and it's not the case anymore. We are in the business to change that mindset, to bring the same design discipline to the technology layer of the built environment as we do every other component. I'll freely admit, we're not talking about rocket science here. This is a mindset shift in how we approach technology in the spaces we build. We begin with the design. We often call this the art of the possible. This is where we dream. How big can we dream? How can we create insanely great experiences? What we're designing is the vision of what the space could be, what the future could look like. But design means nothing if it isn't centered on the end user, the human being who will be using the space. To have success in this arena, we have to be radically committed to this human experience, not the technology itself. The technology, the products, the systems, the services, they are a means to the end, a space that works, not just in its form or in its fashion, but in its function. Ooh, that was good. I hope you wrote that down. Okay, a space that works not just in its form or in its fashion, but in its function. Man, I love alliteration. We don't lead with the product, we land on the product through our design process. And despite what you might think, people don't desire technology, specific technologies. That's not what they set out for. What they truly desire is a result, what they can do with the tech, what they can do, in this case, in this space. And what they can do is very much dependent on those technology decisions. There's a quote from Guy Kawasaki that I like. The purpose of innovation is not cool products, but happy people. Is this making sense, guys? Is this resonating with you? Give me a thumbs up in the chat if this is making sense. Also a chance for coffee break. Okay, and if you have any questions while I'm going through this, please throw those in the chat. I'll answer as many questions as I can later. So how do we put these principles into practice? This is the Layer 10 way, the DSDS Framework. Another quote here, this one from George Bernard Shaw. Imagination is the beginning of creation. You imagine what you desire, you will what you imagine, and at last you create what you will. On the previous slide, we talked about the design focus and how we determine what could be done. I was in a design charrette once that illustrates the point about what's possible. One of the architects in the room turned to me and said, Ken, I don't know if we can do this from a technology perspective. And I interrupted him and said, yes. Now, what is it you would like to do? The point is, there's little we can't do. Anything we can imagine, we could probably either find a product that does it or build one that can. But not everything that can be done should be done. And we make that determination through the development of user personas and use cases that are built through day in the life of scenarios, through a technology design charrette, a design charrette focused just on that component of the build. And during that process, we've narrowed down what could be done to what should be done, and then we select the appropriate systems and the vendors to deliver them. Now, in many cases, we're talking about innovation, But innovation has nothing to do with how much you spend. It's about creating a great product, your space, with great experiences that end users will love. Keep in mind, sometimes the final decision is not the most innovative or the most expensive product. Often what best fits the use case is simplicity over sophistication. And as part of this framework, as part of this process, we also consider, of course, the typical project constraints, budget, schedule, market readiness. And one of the often overlooked components of those constraints is risk tolerance. How close to the bleeding edge is your client comfortable with? All of this is input into the strategic technology plan, which documents all of our decisions and acts as our roadmap on how everything works together through deployment and support. But strategy without execution is like an idea that never gets put into practice. It's worthless. Ideas are easy. The money is in the execution. So from selection, we move on to the deployment phase. This is where the rubber meets the road, where the work moves from the suits to the boots. This is when all that planning and design and selection pays off in execution. It's critical at this phase to ensure the proper leadership is in place to lead all of the technology vendors in a coordinated manner, giving that single throat to choke. And after go live, our attention turns to the support model. The key thing to understand here is that support starts during design. We always have to remind ourselves that we're not just building for the building's occupants. It's just as important that the operators, the property management and facilities teams are delivered a suite of products that they are trained in using and with a support plan that maintains operability and engagement. Otherwise, you risk spending a lot of money on tools that look good on paper but aren't used correctly if they're used at all. The key here is not to necessarily get into the managed services business, but to not ignore the support needs of the technology that you select and deploy. And now for my favorite segment, technology run wild. This is where we look at examples of bad technology design. Now, I'm an enthusiast. I'm a technology enthusiast. I believe technology is a force for good in the world. But even I don't believe all tech is good tech. Case in point, I present the digital toilet occupancy system, a name I completely made up because I have no idea what it's called. This is a real example. Now, this is an image I took offline, but it's something that I witnessed personally not long ago in the Baltimore airport. This is a perfect illustration of elegant design, beautiful application without a focus on the human experience. It's quite clear here that somebody took the technology that's used for smart parking for identifying available parking spaces and thought of a new application of that technology. But what is the use case here? This is an example of how we would talk through this in our technology design charrettes. Let's walk through a couple of scenarios. So our user persona is a traveler in let's say, in need of relief. And he leaves the gate and heads down the terminal to find the nearest restroom. He comes across this display. So there are really three options or three scenarios that we can imagine here. First, there's plenty of availability. Plenty of toilets, plenty of urinals, whatever he needs, there's at least one available, and he enters. Scenario two, limited available, maybe one of each. Still, he's going to proceed. This is not going to deter him. The only remaining scenario is if you've got zeros on this board. No toilets, no urinals. So now you have a decision to make, and your options are limited. You can decide to continue walking and look for the next restroom, but you have no insight into what's there. It could be a worse situation. And if you're at DIA, that may be a quarter-mile walk down the terminal. So if you can hold it, you can decide to return to your gate and go on the plane. If you can't, you're going to enter and wait in line. Either way, this information hasn't given you anything useful. The important data point that's missing here is how many people are waiting in line. That's really the only thing I care about. How long is the line? Whether this reads tens or zeros, I'm probably going in. And since it doesn't tell me how many, the only way I'm going to know if there's a particularly long line is if I can see the line, if it's spilling out into the terminal, which is the case today without this technology. So you can see This is a perfect example of tech for tech's sake, a slick solution with no use case. Not to mention, there's a creepy factor that needs to be considered here. I don't mind you knowing where my car is parked, but I'm not sure how comfortable I am with you knowing where my butt is parked. So the moral of the story is just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. You might be asking yourself, would a digital toilet occupancy system fall within the technology scope? If despite our best efforts, if despite working with our client, they insist on moving forward with such a solution, the answer is yes. In a typical project, the IT scope includes everything that needs an internet connection, everything that touches the network, including the network itself. The scope typically covers all the tools and systems from networking and Wi-Fi to conference room AV, physical security, IoT devices, PoE lighting, intelligent building management systems, EV charging stations. As we mentioned, the way we determine what is in and out of scope is through our design shreds, where we use user personas, use cases, day in the life of scenarios to flesh out the scope using the lens of the 5 categories you see here: safety and security, mobility, community, sustainability, and service performance. This is the framework for how we walk our clients through the design process by considering the role of technology and the role it plays in our lives through each of these dimensions. And let's talk about one of these areas as an illustration. We'll focus on mobility. We were in a design charrette for a multi-acre mixed-use development with multifamily, hospitality, office, retail, F&B, and public space. We took each of those user personas, the resident, the hotel guest, the office employer, the visitor, the shopper, diner. And when we looked at that shopper, diner, visitor persona, what we identified were some common challenges, common pain points. And we focused on, in this case, in this example, we focused on parking availability. How can I find a spot on the property that's most convenient to my destination, and how do I pay for it? And from there, we were able to identify some opportunities. How can we equip our visitors to pre-schedule parking? Perhaps there's an opportunity here to develop a community application, an app for their phone. Now that opens opportunities for advertisement, for programming announcements, dynamic deals and coupons from our restaurateurs and retailers. Then we considered the visitor with the electric vehicle. That opened up conversations about charging stations. And if we have an obligation, of course, with most zoning codes that we have to have a certain number of EV charging stations. But how can we leverage those for signage, advertising, wayfinding? And considering also where this particular development's property was in relation to the interstate, it could be seen from the interstate. That led into a discussion on building a Tesla supercharger station, an amenity for the property that by itself would drive more traffic. People for whom the development was not their destination are driving down the interstate and they need a charge. And so they stop. And while their cars are charging, they visit our shops and restaurants. Perhaps while there, they decide to come back when they can spend more time exploring and spend more money. So the point that I'm trying to make here, and hopefully this illustrates why these conversations are so important. What started as a discussion about visitor parking identified a number of opportunities. Getting into their mobile devices. This is prime real estate if you can get there. Improving the attraction for retail and F&B. Identifying a new tenant, possibly a new builder. Increasing traffic to the property. We started out trying to eliminate a pain point with technology. We ended up identifying opportunities to increase attraction, traffic, and monetization. Is this making sense so far? Are you guys getting this? If you have any questions, again, please put them in the chat. So let me take this a step further and share what this looks like in practice. I want to tell you a story about my favorite client, Trailhead Community. This all began with a conference I was scheduled to speak at that actually never got off the ground. We had an early season snowstorm that kept so many attendees and presenters home that we had to cancel the conference or postpone it for several months. I think it was the future of smart office, smart spaces, something like that. But We were there, our booth was set up before it was announced that we were going to have to postpone. And there were maybe 100 other vendors, guests, and speakers that were there. And the project coordinator announced that we would have to postpone, but invited us to stay as long as we'd like. He'd already paid for the space. Coffee was hot, the food was hot. And before we started to pack up, somebody approached our booth and started going through our materials. And I introduced myself, of course, and that person turned out to be the architect for Trailhead Community. And he started telling me their story, a project that I had never heard about, that they were attacking the problem of building housing for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. There are between an estimated 20 and 30,000 adults with IDD who live with parents over the age of 60. Now, this architect, his name was John, had, of course, no way of knowing. He was talking to the father of an autistic teenager at the time. She's 21 now. And this is one of those things that, as a parent of a special needs child, that keeps you up at night. What happens when her mother and I are not around? So not long after that meeting, serendipitous meeting, if you will, Trailhead became a client. And not long after that, I started getting more and more involved in the project beyond just the technology design and deployment. I was invited, along with my wife, to take a seat on the board, and we are now the co-board presidents of Trailhead. Now, from a client perspective, the real point of what I'm trying to share here is that challenge that we were faced with as applying our framework to a community we had not served before, the IDD community, and really proving that our process was independent of build type. This was our first multifamily as well, and user community. Asking ourselves the question, how do we leverage technology in a space geared specifically to this vulnerable population? During the course of our research and our design meetings, we identified the two most critical areas being community and safety and security. And I want to talk a little bit about safety and security to share some insights into how our methodology works. The first thing we noted is that in developing our user personas is that our residents are not the only users we're designing for. Especially when it comes to the safety of the residents, it's just as important to ensure that the primary caregivers, we as the parents, feel safe and secure. For many of us, we're releasing our kids into the world for the first time, sending them out on their own amidst the wolves they can sometimes see. And this can be a very scary proposition, often more for us than for them. An additional step in the design process is considering not just the occupants' needs, but the appropriate security posture, if you will, for the building. This is a suburban apartment complex with very different needs than a downtown office building in, say, Pioneer Square, Seattle. I have a story there too. I don't think I'm going to have time to get into it, but we need to consider the neighborhood, the surrounding businesses, and the potential threats. Is it liquor stores and nightclubs or dog parks and daycares? This information informs our decisions about, in this case, the security applications like access control and video monitoring. How much is enough and how much is too much? Because even in regards to physical security, there is such a thing as too much. We don't want the tech to be overbearing, overreaching, any big brother considerations. You don't want to monitor everything. And within the units themselves, we considered solutions such as motion detection and video monitoring. Now, in multifamily, as some of you may know, video monitoring within the units is strictly prohibited. But those regulations are not built with consideration of this user population, where a parent, a primary caregiver, may want that sort of just maybe one camera over the apartment door just to make sure they can check in every once in a while and make sure that they're there. That's probably a unique case. There aren't many parents or kids, we call them our kids, they're adults, but they're our kids that live there, are going to need that level of support. But we wanted to make sure that we had that in case it was needed. And so I'll talk, actually, let me continue where I was. I'll come back to what we did in response to that. But some of the other technology, in-unit technology that we considered, utility monitoring to identify things like appliances running too long, the oven being left on too long, for example, or water overflowing, video doorbells, smart home automation systems, automated medication reminder boxes. And again, back to the parents. How do we empower the parents to remotely monitor their kids without being overbearing? And we had challenges, especially on the individual level, with varying levels of care, needs of care, different degrees of technology literacy. And so, and this goes back to that interior video monitoring camera, we opted for an opt-in strategy. We built the infrastructure in each space to support whatever end products might be selected by the residents and their families. And from the property's perspective, and also considering that this is not a 100% IDD building, it is about 60% IDD population, and the remainder is affordable housing and active senior. And with that diverse ability population, this opt-in strategy gave us unit flexibility. We were not locked in with identifying these units where this floor was an IDD floor, this was a senior floor. If we had an IDD resident move out, we can move in a senior resident or affordable housing resident into that same unit by creating this infrastructure model. And this also helped us to address one of the financial constraints that many builders are facing right now, and people getting value engineered out of technology, getting value engineered out of the projects, and keeping this affordable is, as we needed to cut back on some of our scope to save on budget to get this thing built, we led our client, Trailhead, and we do this with many of our clients these days as these questions are becoming more prevalent, don't scrimp on the infrastructure. Because what you can afford to install as an end product today is going to look very different in 6 months or a couple of years down the road. Once you're operable, once you're generating revenue, then you can start investing in those systems. And it's a lot easier to do so to reach that ideal goal that you set out to achieve if the infrastructure is already in place and you don't have to open ceilings and walls to get it installed. And just to close out this story about Trailhead, I'm happy to report that this is not a dream. This is live. This is a real photo, not a rendering. We opened in Q4 of last year. We have about 40 residents moved in right now, and we still have some units to sell. So please, if this is a model that interests you, if this is something that speaks to your heart, please reach out to me directly. I'd love to get interested people involved. Okay. So at this point, perhaps you're thinking, okay, this makes sense. I'm getting it. But how do I actually put this into practice on my projects? That's what the Layer 10 Academy is all about. Our mission is to change how technology is integrated into the built environment. We're trying to change an industry, and it's a slow-moving industry at that. For those of you who follow me on LinkedIn, YouTube, or any of our other challenges, you know I share a lot of free content, including this event, what Myron Golden calls his community service content. We're trying to make an impact. We're trying to move the needle. And if we've given you something to think about today, if you found this information valuable, if you've gained a new perspective about how technology should be better integrated into your projects, and you take these learnings and you apply them to your projects today, then I will have achieved my objective. I will have moved the needle even just a little bit, and I will have met my goal for the day. And if this is where you get off the train, if you disembark here, I appreciate having had the opportunity to share what we do with you today. I hope you are able to take what you've learned and apply it to your projects immediately. Together, I believe we can change the industry for the better. I wish you all the best. Stay blessed, my friends. But before you click that exit button, if you are one of those select few who see a challenge and can't help but to attack it head on, if you see an opportunity to revolutionize an industry and you want to be a part of it, to be a change maker, if you see how honing your skills in this area will set you apart from your competition, then you're exactly the person we've designed the Layer 10 Academy for. And the Build Smarter Challenge is for those of you who get it, believe in it, and are ready to take it further. So let's take a look. The Build Smarter Challenge launches Monday, June 2nd. And this is everything you get in that challenge. Over the week, you'll spend 1 hour a day with me live, diving into a focused, practical piece of the Layer 10 framework. Each day is designed to move you forward. Every session includes at least one action you can apply right now to your real-world project. So you're not just learning, you're implementing as we go. I've talked about it today, but in the challenge, you'll get the complete DSDS framework we use with developers, architects, GCs, and operators across healthcare, hospitality, residential, across all build types and sectors. Not just the what, but most importantly, the how. And we'll give you not only that method, but also the tools to take your practice to the next level. Each day, you'll receive a complete workbook, as well as tools and templates to diagnose your current projects and map out smarter ones in the future. These are yours to keep and put into practice immediately. There's no reason for you to reinvent what we've already spent a decade developing. Alignment is where most projects fall apart. We'll show you exactly how to get everyone rowing in the same direction from day one. You'll also have an opportunity to join the VIP community, which gets you access to our private community group where we'll keep the conversations flowing and the strategy going even after the challenge ends. And there are a few other surprises and bonuses we'll reveal during the challenge. But the goal is to equip you to lead smarter projects and actually enjoy the process of getting there. You're not just getting 5 days of training. You're getting access to the same strategies, frameworks, and alignment tools we use in our consulting engagements that regularly cost $100,000 and more. That is not an exaggeration. That's for one project. In fact, $100,000 revenue for a single project that would be a small project. I've earned 3 to 5 times that amount in consulting fees alone working on larger projects like office builds. And in this challenge, you're learning how to apply these skills on every project in every sector for the rest of your career. So imagine that value multiplied with every build. This isn't just a course, it's a capability, a leadership asset, a way of thinking that will save you time, reduce risk, and win trust over and over again. If you're in this industry to lead, to grow, and to differentiate yourself, the ROI from this challenge isn't just $100,000, it's exponential. So now is when you need to be asking yourself, what does it cost to unlock this level of strategy, clarity, and long-term value? Well, it's not $100,000. It's not $10,000. It's not even $1,000. You can join the 5-day Build Smarter Challenge for just $97. That's it. 5 days, one framework, a completely new way to lead tech integrated projects with confidence and control, all for less than $100. This is your entry point to the future of smarter project leadership. And the ROI isn't measured in a single project, it's measured in everything you do from here forward. The link to join the challenge is on the screen, and Jocelyn is going to drop it in the chat. Don't hesitate. Technology isn't slowing down, and you can't afford to stand still. Be sure to secure your spot in the challenge today, and let's get to work. Now let's talk a little bit more about what your $97 investment gets you. Here's what you'll learn in just 1 hour a day in each of the 5 days of the challenge. On day one, we reframe the problem. We discuss why the traditional approach to technology is wrought with failure. We share the hidden costs of outdated thinking, and we introduce the Layer 10 way of looking at the world differently. With that foundation built, on day 2, we get into the details of the 3 pillars of smarter projects: defining success beyond specs, designing for outcomes, not equipment, and how our approach is applicable across all sectors and all build types. On day 3, we break down the DSDS framework piece by piece. This is where most teams get off track, applying the principle to practice. In the challenge, you'll learn how to apply this framework to your current projects. Day 4 is focused on stakeholder engagement, how to overcome obstacles, what strategies to employ, the tools and templates to get you there. And finally, on day 5, we put all of this into action. We wrap everything up in a nice, neat bow and move from awareness to implementation. This is your clear action plan to build smarter. So as you register for the challenge, I'd like to open up for questions. Let me see if there's anything in the chat, the Q&A section. Okay. So how do I future-proof my spaces? This is a, excuse me. This is a question I get fairly often, and it's actually one I don't even like the phrasing of, and I typically rephrase it from future proofing to future readying, because future proofing suggests a defensive posture that you're trying to prevent something from happening. The future is going to happen whether you're ready for it or not. So might as well get ready for it. So that's one. But let me address the question as if I asked it, which is, how do I future ready my spaces? Well, I another question I often get is, what does the future look like? The future of office, the future of whatever build type you can think of, and I don't know the answer to that question. If I did, I would probably be in a different business. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what's next. I think certainly artificial intelligence is going to play a significant role in the future of every industry and everything that we do. But I don't know what that looks like. I think machine learning, AI is going to have an impact on intelligent building management systems, but that's not the business I'm in, and that's not what we do at Layer 10. We don't pick products and we don't try to predict the future. What my recommendation is to assume this is what I can predict. I can predict that there's going to be more technology. There's going to be an impact. It's going to change how spaces are interacted with. It's going to look different in 10 years than it looks right now. And so build the infrastructure in place that gives you the best chance of supporting whatever that technology looks like. When you're building ground up, when you're already tearing open the walls or building them from scratch, that's when you put in the pathway, the conduit, the cabling for more than what you need right now. Because it's much easier. It's pennies compared to dollars if you do it now while the walls are open. So that's my answer to that question, is build for a future we can't predict by investing in infrastructure. Okay. What about getting value engineered out? That is a question that we do get often. I kind of touched on this a little bit. It's about investing in the infrastructure. The industry that we're working in today looks so different than even it did in 2020. Even getting through the pandemic, we didn't see the pains that we're seeing right now in commercial real estate. And I don't know that the worst is behind us yet. I think we're still going to see some significant shifts. So it is becoming more and more common that we have these value engineering conversations that we never had before, and that we're being asked to pull back. And again, it's the infrastructure. Invest where it makes sense so that you can deploy systems that maybe you can't afford today, but you want to be in a position to deploy those down the road. Okay, hopefully I addressed that question. Do you do group coaching? Yes. So along with the challenge that we are offering today, we do offer one-on-one coaching. We offer group coaching, so training and long-term training sessions, lesson plans, or just a sort of like a 1 week in person or virtual training. Prefer to do something like that in person, but all of those are options. If you'd like me to come in and train your entire team on this, we can certainly do that. We can come up with a plan for that. We also still do project consulting, so we haven't abandoned that business. The academy is our opportunity to expand our impact by empowering others to do things the way we've created them, but we also still apply those to projects on a project by project basis. Okay, so if you have any questions on that, you can email me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can have a conversation about it. Okay, for $97, it's only why not just give it away for free? So I'm a firm believer that we pay attention to what we pay for. I'm not sure where I first heard that. But we pay attention to what we pay for. $97 is not a high bar. to set. It's not a barrier to entry for most people. But if we make an investment in something, we're more likely to invest in it, to invest our time in it, and to make it something that's important to us, and we stay engaged. So that is why we have such a low a low ceiling for that, or a low barrier to entry. Okay, I'm going to, again, if you have any more questions, please put them in the Q&A and I will try to address them. But I do want to discuss again a little more detail about the VIP opportunity. So when you follow the link on the screen or in the chat, you're going to see everything you get in this challenge, everything that I've already talked about and more. And that $97 general admission gives you that full experience. But if you want to go even deeper, to get personalized guidance, exclusive tools, and extended access, then the VIP path may be for you. As a VIP, you'll get behind-the-scenes strategy, access to replays, additional templates, and bonus content. You'll get free membership in our private community where more in-depth and ongoing conversations happen. And most importantly, VIPs get questions answered specific to their projects. We'll have a special session just for our VIPs for Q&A. And you can ask me whatever you'd like, and I will address your specific questions directly. Now, all of this is described at this link. And if you're ready to accelerate your results and tap into the full depth of the challenge, you should strongly consider upgrading to VIP. It's the smartest next step. Okay, let me check. All right, I think we've answered all of the questions. I invite you all to stay connected. You can find Layer 10 where you find everyone across the socials. You can connect with me personally on LinkedIn. You can email me here. While you're on LinkedIn, please be sure to subscribe to our Building Tomorrow newsletter, where you'll get updates about Layer 10 and about how we approach the work that we do, and stay on top of industry news. If you have any questions about Layer 10, Layer 10 Academy, the Build Smarter Challenge, or Trailhead, if that's a mission that speaks to you, don't hesitate to reach out. We love engaging with our audience, and we're always looking for like-minded, mission-driven individuals and companies looking to make a difference. So that's it. I hope you've gotten value for the investment of your time here today, and that we gave you some actionable insights to take into the field immediately. I wish you all the best. Stay blessed. We'll talk soon.